Hello and good morning to this morning's 7th webinar under the remit of the ICT Footprint.eu Coordination and Support Action funded under the Horizon 2020 program of the European Commission. And we are proud to announce that today's webinar is called Low Carbon ICT Green Rating Investment Tool, Carbon Free Report and Data Centers. With us this morning, we have three very renowned speakers. We have Jakub Bartnicki, who's the Energy and Built Environment Services Manager from Trust EPC South and Bureau Veritas, followed by our second speaker, who's Adina Braha-Honciuc, the Government Affairs Manager, EU Policy from Microsoft. And finally, our third speaker is Webster, CEO of the Data Center Consultancy and former mayor, head of data center development, also Yahoo, and a former board member of the UDCA. Now, what I will do is briefly describe, bear with me, the ICT Footprint proposal and project. There are actually three partners. It's made up of Trust IT Services, the coordinator, which is ourselves. We're an SME, which delivers ICT communication to market, and we work on research. And we basically want to become the consolidated effort in Europe that raises awareness around ICT methodologies. We showcase best practices in measuring the energy environmental efficiency within the ICT sector, and we want to basically, in our 36 months, as we're halfway into the project, introduce and facilitate broad deployment and uptake by a series of different stakeholders. To help do this, we've introduced a set of services that ICT Footprint needs to pull out, and some are already available, as we have these webinars that are regularly attended and organized. We have on the ICTFootprint.eu a marketplace, which is available for both buyers and sellers. And as we're introducing we've introduced and have now developed a consolidated community in this area, we want to provide you with the opportunity to showcase what you have on offer in terms of your ICT energy efficiency products, and an opportunity to actually view others who are selling their similar services. In addition, we want to also showcase success stories so people can learn from these and have them as best practices. We also have an interactive map of updated ICT methodologies and how they've progressed over the past months and years amongst efforts carried out by different standard development organizations and industry. And what we then will be left with as a lasting legacy would be some self-assessment tools or self-awareness tools to help pick up people becoming more savvy around their measuring their carbon footprint and how it can become sustainable thanks to a series of ICT standards and methodologies. I didn't go forward with the slide there, so that was that last one, which I've just reiterated for you here. So if you're interested in getting involved, if you're on the call and you haven't heard about us before, then do drop us a line and have a look at the website and tell us how you'd like to support or contribute to some of the services that we're offering. Now, without further ado, I'd like to pass to our first speaker of the webinar, who's Jakub Bartnicki, the presentation from Trust EPC South Project and Bureau Veritas. The presentation is Green Rating for Energy Performance Contracts, Standardizing Your Technical Building Improvement. Now, Jakub has over 10 years' experience in identifying and delivering technical energy and carbon advice to building owners, managers and occupiers, supporting their way towards sustainability. And he'll introduce the Green Rating for Energy Performance Contracts, which was a technical and financial assessment methodology developed through the Horizon2020-funded Trust EPC South project. And with that, I'd like to pass the floor over to you, Jakub. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Silvana. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I will be talking about saving energy, mostly in buildings. Obviously, if you are an ICT-intensive organization, you will have to take the energy consumption of your building and whatever is supporting your services and processes into account and start reducing it. We all know how to do it. As a very simple example, we'll first just switch our lights off, and this is easy. And then we'll move towards changing our lamps. And, well, that is quite easy as well. And then will come another point when we'll have to follow up with smart controls and more complicated measures, things that are becoming more and more expensive and require more and more effort. And at that point, we'll realize that it's really not that easy anymore. It's not that easy to pay for. It's not that easy to finance. And this is exactly why energy performance contracts were created. Energy performance contract will make sure that an energy savings company can come into the building that you occupy or your building and implement improvements, technical building improvements and operational improvements, pay for them, and be paid from the savings. Those savings are, theoretically at least, supposed to be guaranteed. So if we look at the ICT intensive organizations, we'll be looking especially at the cooling systems, all the service, small power, but also at everything else that is around. Why is it becoming more and more complicated? Well, if you look at energy performance contracting, you will see that right now it really only exists in public sector. And European Commission at the Horizon 2020 decided that it needs to change and the tertiary sector needs to be involved much more. And they realized at a certain point of time that, well, there is no trust towards the methodologies and approaches. There are hundreds and hundreds of building energy consultants. Some are better, some are worse. The problem that the market is facing is that everyone will use a slightly different approach to identifying those energy efficiency improvements. Our job here within the Trust EPC South is to standardize them. And this is exactly what we did. We have come up with a very exciting methodology of energy performance contract assessment, where we'll take the building and equipment technical information and all the data related to energy consumption and cost, and we'll put that in something that has been there for quite a while, the green rating methodology, a methodology which allows us to calculate building energy breakdowns, do it in the standardized ways, and figure out what should be done in a building. Then we will move towards a financial assessment to ensure that this project is actually bankable, that we can finance it, well, that someone can finance it for us, and make sure that this project goes live and brings the savings as we expect them. Now, this is, again, quite simple. In order to build trust, we need to ensure that those calculations are standardized and that this approach is standardized. And what we will be doing, we will be certifying those energy performance contract projects. At the end of each project, you would receive a certificate. The project will receive a certificate. There are leaves and the fancy financial graph logotypes, which will give you indication on how good this project is. How much energy can be saved if we replace our chillers and introduce operational measures into the buildings and make sure that our small power is correctly set up and is working in the right way and is using the best technologies and that someone is actually paying for it. So what we did, we took this methodology called green rating, which has already been there in the market for quite some time and had a quite good success ratio. And using this methodology, we asked our friends from the Trust EPC South Consortium to devise standardized energy efficiency and renewable energy source measures. the whole trick in that was to ensure that we can always calculate them in the same way, without rules of thumb and without guessing how much it might be. This way, we can ensure that every single time our measures are calculated the same way and are reliable. Then we devised the whole process where the tools we created for the project will, depending on the data that we put in it, and that will be technical building information, that data will trigger recommendations and measures that should be implemented in our energy performance contract project. Now, each measure that we identified, and you will see that many of those will be very, very applicable to the ICT sector. Each of those measures has a number of very specific triggers. If those criteria are not met, those measures will not be triggered. But if they are, it will mean that those particular recommendations should really be implemented in the building we are looking at in order to reduce its energy consumption. We'll have a bit of freedom because obviously the experienced auditors know exactly why they want to recommend something, and then we will move towards calculation. Every single measure that we'll be looking at is calculated independently. It will have its own dedicated sheet where we would be putting the improvement data. But the beauty of the system is that at the end, those measures will be combined in various scenarios and various iterations where we will be able to tell you which set of measures will be the most applicable and will bring the best financial results for a project. Which set of measures and which set of recommendations will have the highest chance of success. That will take us towards the financial assessment. That financial assessment will take various aspects into account which are required to correctly calculate the financial outputs of such an exercise, and will present us with the top scenarios for the top sets of measures in the building. It will take into account so many different things that I can't even imagine talking too much about it. But what you will get at the end will be the certificate you have seen just a few minutes ago, which will tell you that the building that you are in, the building that you operate in, the building in which you are using energy can be improved, and it can be improved in a very specific way, hence reducing energy consumption and the carbon footprint of your organization. This is all being achieved by the Trust EPC South, and we, of course, would welcome you to visit our website and take a look in detail at what we do. And then afterwards, well, go for an energy performance contract. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jakub. That was a very insightful presentation. Can you just tell me, is the Trust EPC South project, it's still ongoing? And if yes, when does it come to an end?
Yes, the project is ongoing. It comes to an end at the end of 2018. We are now at the critical stage of it. We are running our pilot project. All the tools and methodologies are ready and live. So within the next couple of months, we'll have the first sets of results, including the bankability of projects.
Including what? Sorry, Jakub, I didn't get that.
Sorry, bankability of projects.
The bankability, okay.
Yes.
So zooming in also on Bureau Veritas, which you're also part of Bureau Veritas, correct me if I'm wrong, yes?
Yes, of course.
And so thanks to your lead there, obviously has a completely different dimension on the impact and importance of the idea of certification. Why am I asking you this? And if we through ICT Footprint or other similar projects that are pulling out some tools and services, how easy would it be to go to someone like Bureau Veritas and say, okay, how, can you certify this? I know it's an extremely complex scenario if we were to go to Carbon Trust, for example, and many others. This is not an easy thing at all. How has this facilitated, clearly, you being part of this, to take this forward, and would you advise others to contact you on other things that they're working on, or is it very, very difficult?
Well, in this particular case, what we created here within Bureau Veritas is the technical methodology that we would be using for those types of projects. And obviously, what we would be certifying, what we actually will be certifying, will be the outcomes of those projects. Now, the certification of a project itself is, in terms of complexity, quite similar to the in-use versions of BREEAM and LEED projects. Obviously, we're looking at very different things here, and we have very different approach. But just to give you a scale of comparison in this particular case, if, however, you are looking to create a certain certification, create an approach or a view on how something could be certified, and give it some weight and importance, then obviously Bureau Veritas is a perfect place to come to. We are an organization which provides certification services only as a part of our services. We are mostly a technical inspection company, but obviously within our consulting capability, we are more than able to go through those processes and prepare certification schemes as we've done in the past.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I imagine the criteria is pretty laborious, right?
Of course it is. Creating the green rating scheme, just for this from this perspective, took us about 4 years. Just creating the scheme itself. It is only now becoming a certification scheme, and only under the green rating for energy performance contract, and only preparing that together with a consortium of companies from Trust EPC South. It took us another 2 years of very, very hard work. So it's not just a click of fingers.
No, certainly not. What can you tell us then, with the last final question before we move on, what future developments do you have planned for the green rating tool specifically?
We're obviously looking at further specification. So at this particular point within the green rating tool, we're able to cover 6 different building typologies, and we would like to extend to others. Obviously, we are able to cover others, but we want to become far more specified. And from this particular perspective, one of our potential targets would be, for example, data centers, where we would really want to go that much deeper into detail to be able to provide a better and more reliable level of certification than just having ICT as a very important, but only as an aspect of the whole certification scheme. So we'll be looking at different typologies, definitely.
Okay. I think you recall at the beginning we mentioned our marketplace, and there's an area where you can submit, what you're doing. Perhaps now that you're in a bit more of a mature stage of your pilot and tool, you can consider perhaps uploading this once ready on our marketplace, Jakub. This is something obviously we want to invite everyone to consider, and it would obviously maximise visibility for yourselves too. We'd like to perhaps maybe find out the results when your pilot goes live in the next couple of months, so we'll be keeping in touch with you with that, Jakub, if you don't mind.
That will be absolutely brilliant.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank you once again, Jakub, for your presentation. Before moving on to introducing our second speaker, I would like to just introduce an oversight I made at the beginning. The ICT Footprint are made up of 3 partners, and I don't know if I mentioned them, the Trust ICT, which coordinates this initiative, and then we're supported by experts in their field from Deloitte Sustainability from France and Eurocities in Belgium. Okay, thank you very much then. So moving on to speaker number 2, we have Adina Braha-Honciuc from Microsoft. She's the Government Affairs Manager for EU Policy at Microsoft, and her presentation title is Carbon Pricing and Digital Transformation. Adina leads Microsoft's accessibility, sustainability, and online safety policy for Europe. Prior to that, she was working in the field of corporate strategy, Procter & Gamble in Geneva and Beiersdorf in Hamburg. So Adina will, in her presentation today, showcase the Microsoft Carbon C report. By operating carbon neutral, Microsoft has changed the way it operates. So with that, I would like to pass the floor to you, Adina, and welcome. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to present today. I hope all of you are hearing me well. As Silvana presented, my name is Adina. I'm managing sustainability and environment policy for Microsoft in Europe, among others. I want to talk to you today about Microsoft's sustainability strategy, and in particular, how we're using carbon pricing to meet our operational commitments and to drive digital transformation. I will also move the slides to remember that as well. Perfect. So first, I want to talk to you about our sustainability mission. That is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to thrive in a resource-constrained world. As we're all aware, there are serious and growing environmental resource constraints that impact us, our communities worldwide, and all of our customers. And we've set this mission to do our part to address those through our technology, through our policies, and through our investments. Maybe I'll go back and tell you a little bit about our history. Our focus on sustainability isn't new. We've been tracking and reducing emissions since 2007, and we've been operating our data centers and the rest of the company at 100% carbon neutrality since 2012. But even more important work lies ahead. And as it was mentioned earlier today in this webinar, digital transformation is here today, and virtually every company is becoming a digital company. And across the tech sector, we need to recognize that data centers will rank by the middle of the next decade among the largest users of electrical power on the planet. And we need to keep working on a sustained basis to build and operate greener data centers that should serve the world well. And what does that mean for us? That means moving beyond data centers that are already 100% carbon neutral, but also having those data centers rely on a larger percentage of renewable energy, that is wind, solar, and hydropower electricity. Today, roughly 44% of the electricity used by our data centers comes from these sources. And our goal is to pass the 50% milestone by the end of 2018, and then top 60% early in the next decade, and then to keep improving from there. And especially if you think about the magnitude of data center expansion that will continue definitely throughout this time period, this is really not a small goal. So we are factoring in our growth in that goal. And it requires that we understand where we've come from over the past few years and really take a principled approach to our work in the future. What we started to do is to translate these principles into clear and concrete goals that we can use to hold ourselves accountable in a responsible way. And we're also aware that it will require work with many other important stakeholders and institutions, from environmental groups to utilities and governments themselves. In Europe, we've actually just concluded our two first energy deals, one in Ireland and one in the Netherlands. The Irish one is really interesting because it is a project we're doing in cooperation with GE, and it's about 2 new wind farms that are being built, and Microsoft will buy the renewable energy, 100% of the energy produced by those wind farms. But what is interesting as well is the integration of technology, because renewable energy will only become a viable alternative if we also build the infrastructure and the storage capabilities to maintain this growth. And our new wind deal in Ireland will also include battery storage integration, which is the first integration of this kind in Europe. But let me move forward to our carbon commitments as well, because these carbon commitments are really what stays at the basis of our sustainability investments, and I will explain how. So in 2012, we committed to be carbon neutral by the end of the year. We met that goal back then, and we have met it every year since. And during that time, we were expanding our cloud business substantially and building facilities and networks globally to keep pace of our business. In parallel, our carbon neutral commitment changed the way we operate around the globe and has become really the cornerstone of our sustainability efforts company-wide. This year, at COP23 in Bonn, we announced that we are committed to operating our business consistent with climate science. So based on our existing commitments, we will reduce our operational greenhouse gas emissions 75% by 2030 relative to a 2013 base year. And how we'll do this? We'll accomplish that through continued progress against our carbon neutrality, and also renewable energy commitments that I mentioned before, as well as investments in energy efficiency. And we think this puts Microsoft on a path as a company to meet the goals set in the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a level of decarbonization that many scientists believe is necessary to keep global temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius. And we estimate that this will help avoid more than 10 million metric tons of carbon emissions by 2030. And as we expand our global cloud infrastructure, we will increasingly turn to renewable energy because it is clean power source and it gives us better financial predictability. We think it's good for the environment, for our customers, and for our business. And just to give you a few numbers as well, our cloud-based programs to reduce resource consumption have already contributed to our 20% global energy reduction at our facilities, reducing emissions, and also, of course, our power bill. And the data we've collected on our energy consumption laid the groundwork for us to now buy our own clean energy at market rate. And for example, in the US, we will soon be powering our headquarters campus with 100% carbon-free energy. But let me tell you a little bit more about the carbon fee mechanics and how that works and how we're setting up the carbon price. So what we do is we assess emissions for a given year, a forward projection of future year electricity consumption, direct emissions, and business air travel. We develop a budget for our investments based on those emissions. So how much we need to pay to meet and report on our commitments, and then a fund for technology innovation in the areas of our sustainability goals. We then set the price level based on calculating our investment need and dividing that by the business group emissions, as I said, derived from electricity, direct emissions, and business air travel. And the price can change year on year based on our budget. But to give you an estimation, the Microsoft fee has ranged from $5 to $10 a metric ton in recent years. And to give you a sense of our operational results, since 2012, we have purchased 14 billion kilowatt-hour of green power and reduced over 9 million tons of carbon equivalent, including offsets, and now we are using it to drive digital transformation across our sustainability focus areas. And the reason I mentioned this innovation fund, so the fund that is put together with this carbon fee is really the fund that finances all the investments that we're doing in the sustainability area. That is why it is really, really important. And that is why it acted really as an incentive for a lot of different departments and subsidiaries and business groups to put together very interesting projects, because each department, really each business unit can actually bid for a sustainability project in their region, in their country, and those projects are being financed from this carbon fee. And I want to give you a few examples of what we're doing with that fund. I would like to focus maybe on one of them because of the time we have left. That is called the Microsoft WhatTime tool, since it just became available to European customers as well. So at COP23, WhatTime, it's a Rocky Mountain Institute subsidiary, together with Microsoft, launched a new way to give customers the power to understand and reduce their carbon emissions. And it basically, it's a software to automatically detect the precise carbon emissions caused by using or generating electricity at any particular time and place in Europe, and that happens in real time. WhatTime and Microsoft have collaborated using US data so far since early 2017, and the Norwegian utility Agder Energy will be the first organization in Europe to deploy the software. There are also plans for rollout across the rest of Europe. So what the tool does, it can inform operators of energy-consuming equipment, from smartphones to large energy storage facilities or entire hydroelectric dams, of the carbon implications of consuming or producing energy at particular times. And armed with this data, consumers and operators can adjust their behavior and adjust their operating plans to instantly achieve emission reductions at a very low cost. The tool could also be useful for policymakers looking to lower carbon emissions. For example, policymakers could introduce price incentives for people charging electric cars to do so at times of lower emissions, or the charging could be automated to correspond to times that would reduce consumers' costs and emissions. This could facilitate more renewable energy on the grid by moving demand curves to correspond to renewable generation and allowing the integration of higher level of renewables. So these are just a few examples of how it can be used, but we're just looking at the first rollout. And finally, I want to tell you about another exciting project that we're financing out of our carbon fee, which is called AI for Earth, Artificial Intelligence for Earth. It is a new program that we launched in July, and it is aimed at putting the power of artificial intelligence towards solving some of the biggest environmental challenges of our time. So what it does is it puts artificial intelligence in the hands of researchers and organizations that have great ideas about how to solve environmental challenges, but need the data tools to do that. So researchers can apply with their research proposals to this program, and Microsoft will offer grants consisting in access to cloud and AI computing resources, technology trainings, and other types of educational facilities. That's a $2 million commitment in this fiscal year. So perhaps in closing, I've been reflecting a little bit on the topic and talking quite a lot with my colleagues that have been representing us at COP23, and the more we're focused on these issues, the more apparent it has become to us that the world needs really an ever-broadening conversation to make sustained progress. And much has been accomplished in this regard in recent years, including, of course, the new global commitment to address these issues. But we will all need to work together to translate this into types of practical steps that are needed, and that was very clear at COP23 as well. We've definitely learned a lot about this multi-stakeholder collaboration in the past year. And to give you an example, from the US now, Microsoft joined an innovative public-private partnership with Dominion Power and the state of Virginia to do that. So Dominion will build a 20-megawatt solar energy plant to bring new additional clean energy to the grid in Virginia, and Microsoft helped fund it and will claim and retire the green attributes. So partnering with utilities and government in these types of ways can really impact the grid beyond our own operational needs and can help accelerate the transition to a cleaner energy economy. But we've also learned that this progress that's needed will not come easily, and the issues are very complex, and the steps that are needed are very varied, and real progress will require that groups across non-governmental, business, governmental communities will find new ways to work together. Happy to be sharing our experience today. Thank you very much again, and happy to hear if you have questions.
Adina, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. We do have questions from the audience. Two for you and one for Jakub. I'm also sensitive to our time and don't want to have to run out on our third speaker, Derek. So I would suggest we take the question one, Adina, if you can see that in front of you. There are three questions in here. Perhaps you would like to maybe take it from a bird's eye view and see what you can answer perhaps in a couple of minutes. And then if we have time at the end, we'll address the second question and the one for Jakub as well.
Yes, so I can see a few questions. Maybe I'll quickly answer about the advice to other organizations that want to implement similar approaches. Yeah, I think that's an easy one in the sense that one of the main advices we've been giving to companies that want to implement a carbon fee is that really that is also a way to anticipate legislation. It's also a way to show investors your commitment to sustainability. And we've seen at Microsoft that investors are looking more and more at that. Even if, charging your own business units actually impacts your bottom line, the interest from investors for those kind of investments we're making, and the charging our own business units actually brings more value to Microsoft. And our team in the US, we have a small team that is working on carbon pricing. They're also always happy to have one-to-one conversations with other companies to talk really in details about the mechanisms of implementing such a fee in your company. So if there is interest around that, I'd be happy to discuss offline as well.
Adina, thank you very much. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
So, moving forward to our third and final speaker of our webinar, I'd like to introduce to you all Derek Webster, who's the CEO of the data center consultancy Amjet. And Derek works with clients from data center country and site selection at a pre-investment project level to align business case to strategy with best value CapEx deployment. He helps clients define or refine their data center strategy, KPI, ROI, and deployment models from single site to global deployment. And his title is, Can Formula One Data Center Design Greener Sector for Everyone with ROI Benefits? And with that, I'll pass the floor over to yourself, Derek. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a topic which I think links into the two previous speakers. So this is about thinking greener, but also thinking wider. And the slides I'm going to present are basically thinking about the responsible action, just looking at a macro view rather than a micro view, and what might be achieved. So I'm going to focus on a project that was in the thinking stage in 2006, and how it took a number of years from thinking to doing, and how challenging what was considered the industry normal was not the most energy or green way of doing things. But just to set the scene, the data center sector is predicted to grow by 3 times the energy use. I think that has to be offset a little bit by, if you look at GDP growth and you look at the flows of data, GDP of the world has grown by 10% by looking at the industries that are impacted by the net and moving data across. And I think that's equated to something like $2.8 trillion of additional trade that the internet and moving data help facilitate. So the problem is it's good for GDP, but it's also not good for energy use. And how do you actually address that as a sector that is roughly 2% of global greenhouse gases? So that's setting the scene of the issues and what you can do at the data center level to try and mitigate that. So I'm going to sneak a couple of slides in actually from a conference that happened in Brussels in June. And the question put to the European Data Center Association was, how would you get to near zero energy consumption? My first thought was, you put everything on the moon. That doesn't have to be on the Earth, but perhaps that's not a practical way of looking at it. So we thought about this as an organization pretty hard. How would you get close to zero? So we tried to look at, from a data center point of view, what would that mean? So a data center, in effect, moves digital work. Everything that we do is probably has an ICT element in it, from shopping to talking on the phone now to social media to backup storage, etc. So if you took a sort of a Formula One way of thinking in terms of how would you be different, quicker, faster, better than the rest, and that tech normally filters down. But I think what's more important is to look at where the total energy is actually used. So if you look at the most efficient data centers around the world, they only really consume 9.1% of the energy that isn't the ICT kit That's the servers, the routers, the switches that live in the data center space. So the data center is the envelope and the environment that houses the ICT kit. So when you look at other buildings, that 9.1% of efficiency of the infrastructure itself, I believe, is still one of the world's most efficient types of construction for purpose. So the problem is not so much the data center, it's the equipment that's running it, because over 90% of the energy and the carbon load is just running the ICT kit. So if I move on to the next slide. So when you look, how do you mitigate that? How do you get close to zero carbon and to more greener energy use? Well, obviously you look at the locations on where the energy is being generated, and obviously green sources, and I think Microsoft, Adina has already mentioned wind and hydro. Very important. Not all data center applications can be that far out of the city, but I'm guessing that maybe 80% of services and applications don't have to be in a big city where the energy is not normally that green. So looking where you site the data centers is very important. What's coming up very fast is how do you reuse the energy? And if you look at the European marketplace, not every part of Europe can reuse the waste heat. The Nordic countries do very well because they have combined heat and power. But there's also some innovative schemes on the drawing board now, and some to be in deployment, which will use the waste hot air to maybe help growers of food to more efficiently grow their produce. So there's some interesting developments there. Climate can be key too, where you put your data center. If you can keep it in a cooler climate, that helps, although it doesn't have to be that cold. And the infrastructure around it. But again, as the slide shows, it is the ICT kit which is predominantly the issue, how you utilize that kit, how efficiently you set that up, and the software you actually use to automate as much as you can. So try to show a smiley face there with what gives you a green balance. So the location, the generation of power, and how you use the power are absolutely key in reducing that energy and carbon cost. So I just want to show you an example of sort of this Formula One design we were talking about. So it's a project I've worked on since 2006 and went live in 2011, I think it did, 2012. And we chose almost a location that most data center people would never think to actually build. It has a lot of issues. We were sitting on top of an archaeological site, very close to a very pretty village. And this was in Switzerland. And we had a design we wanted to use, but then decided we weren't going to use it. But it had a number of benefits. Switzerland has 95% hydro power. We looked at paying the extra tariff to make it 100%, so we knew the energy we were using would come from 100% hydro source. We were capturing water from rain to help run the cooling systems in the site. It was a much more bigger view. The district heating system, we were buying the water from the village or from the town to heat the office side, and the generator sets to keep them warm for easy starting. Again, it's that macro view of just thinking that a little bit wider. So this is what we wanted to build, which is a Yahoo chicken coop, as it's called. And in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 were the most efficient sites in the world. The web giants have caught up and are doing equally as well. So we wanted to build these. these model sites that work at the peak efficiency. But we ended up building this. So we bought an ex-factory unit, and we still gained the same efficiencies, but we looked very deeply into the carbon use, and even went down to silly details of there's a carbon cost to buying a new roof. Why don't we line the existing 50-year-old roof with another skin roof? So if you think very deeply, you can get amazing, not just carbon and energy results, but also capex spend reduction also. And as I said, the town in the middle of Switzerland, very pretty town, has a Roman amphitheatre in there. And part of the construction, we were very much aware that we might find the odd Roman remains. And what actually happened was there were houses, streets, and marketplaces. So we worked the construction around the excavation. And yes, we did find coins, and we did find 3 layers of Roman ruins, but this is all part of what we knew we were taking on, and this is giving back to the community, because the archaeologists won't touch the ground unless there's approved building works. So we moved from building new to adjusting the old, but we still gave the archaeologists right to dig up as we actually went, and it was a fascinating process. So that's just a quick example of what it is. That's a plan. The green area at the bottom was the expansion, which we know were completely an archaeological site. The footprint of the building has not changed at all, but we still managed to save the efficiencies and world-class energy use that the web giants enjoy today. And this is the final slide. If you can see the orange rectangle there, that's to show we didn't change the industrial view. So the previous slide shows the chateau, and overlooking the chateau, you see this industrial area, and we thought, well, let's not make the view even worse by building chicken coops. And that green area on the previous slide, let's see if I can go back to it, is actually a field. So we decided to plant alpine plants, and for free, the local farmers could harvest those alpine plants during the summer months, just to make use of land that was just green field. So that just gives you a very quick overview of by thinking wider and bigger. How it's not just the infrastructure you're building, it's how it impacts into the location that you're putting that capex in, and that you don't just measure from the building, you measure the materials and the impact at a much more wider scale. Over.
Derek, thank you very much for that. Thank you, that was very insightful. I have a few questions for you, if I may. How does the European situation differ from our global partners? And is there a difference?
Yes, I mean, I'm glad to actually say that. I mean, I've worked around the globe, so I've seen how different regions of the world approach data center construction. If you take the US, I don't think there's any doubt that the European approach is ahead in thinking, and the performance and the designs I think are ahead of the US market. And I think at that European Commission session, Energy Sustainability Week, one of the speakers on that session from the EU Code of Conduct, Isabella Machino, she actually says that they had a visit to Silicon Valley, and she also agreed that the large American companies were nowhere near as advanced. So that came from Isabella's word. And also speaking to the ex-head of Microsoft's data center deployment for EMEA, he also admitted that the way Europe handles the constructions and the designs, I don't think he really liked to admit it, but we were ahead of what Microsoft were doing, and even to the point where Microsoft extensively use European design companies across the globe. So I think we have more to shout about in green credentials.
Okay, very, very good. I have another question for you. It's that's come up from the audience. It says, any insights on how shall data center managers, first of all, very nice presentation, and public administrations work together to make the most out of data center resources, e.g. district heating usage?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is an area I've just seen on the question there, green spectre also. So it's a very interesting area because there's not many parts of Europe where it's practical to reuse the energy. But where it has happened, and this is my point about not all the applications have to be city centre, you can go out of city and still get some amazing results. And a good example of that is a Russian company called Yandex, built in Finland, and they built their data centre in a town called Mäntsälä, a small town, but it had a CHP district heating system. As soon as they plugged their wastewater into the town's district heating system, their carbon loss reduced by 40%. And their energy cost went down by 20. So the effects can be dramatic. I think the thinking here is the location of where you put the data center, the applications and services you are trying to actually run. I think there's a great thought where not all data centers are the same, and you should put a different type of design for the different types of applications and services that run out of a data center building.
Okay. One quick last question before we reach our conclusions. It's just come up. It says, hi Derek, you did not talk about impacts of software and data center consumption. In Green Spectre, we observed for some customers gain of 80%, some use cases. Can data center providers integrate efficient applications in their pricing bonus model based on?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm very much aware of what Green Spectre does. I'm a bit of a closet fan, to be fair. I think what these guys do is where the big action is. It's the servers and the kit, and they can help give you more processing per watt by taking out rubbish and inefficient code. So to answer the question, if there was one thing that people can do now, it's just to get their software right, will have a big impact on the amount of energy use and also the amount of capex you spend on the servers too. So it's a very good question that can have a big impact. If everybody could get their software right, there's masses of energy gains to be made now.
That's brilliant, Derek. I don't think we have enough time for any more questions. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our three speakers, Jakub, Adina and Derek. These details are online of the webinar, so you have their contact details that we can follow up on any of these questions. What I'd like to leave you all with is sort of some takeaways, some actionable items that clearly, if you're not doing any of these bullet lists that we have here, we kindly invite you to take advantage of, being part of the community, registering to the newsletter, contacting us directly, see if you want to get involved in future webinars. If you want to showcase something that you're doing, which is really cool, we'd love to hear about it. And best of luck on our activities in the coming weeks. So with that, I'd like to conclude this webinar. I wish you all a lovely afternoon and the rest of the week, and thanks once again to our speakers. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.